If people call you the Great after your name, you're likely a significant figure in history. Throughout the millennia of Western civilization's rise and fall, there have been exceptional emperors, but Alexander the Great's conquests stand out as unparalleled. Today, we are going to talk about how one man's audacity and ambition reshaped the course of history forever. We'll explore the life and legacy of Alexander the Great. But what are the accomplishments that elevate Alexander to the status of great? Stay tuned till the end to discover the amazing story of a true historical titan. The Kingdom of Macedon, situated in northern Greece during the Classical era, circa 600 to circa 300 BC, initially remained relatively inconspicuous in comparison to influential Greek cities like Athens, Sparta, Thebes, and Corinth. In a pivotal historical moment when the Persians invaded in 490 BC, Macedon opted to surrender, becoming a part of the Persian Empire for several decades. Macedon stood apart from other Greek city-states due to its unique governance system, a pure monarchy. This distinctive setup meant that the king held absolute authority over the state, with little to no room for democratic processes. While this arrangement disadvantaged commoners, as they had limited influence in governmental matters, it empowered the ruling class to concentrate the city's resources into building a formidable army. Sparta, too, had a strong military focus, but it imposed stringent eligibility criteria for military service, which restricted the size and influence of its armed forces. However, for much of its history, Macedonian kings primarily focused on their own territory, with Persia looming large on the horizon, a formidable, powerful, and somewhat intimidating adversary. For most of its history, Macedon didn't really care about what was happening beyond its borders, but in 359 BC, that would change. When Philip II became the king of Macedon, he had a clear goal in mind: bring Greece together and conquer Persia. For a long time, the Persians had been causing trouble for the Greeks. The Greco-Persian Wars had brought a lot of death and destruction to Greece, and the Persians had even taken control of Greek cities in Ionia, which is the southwestern coast of modern-day Turkey. Because the Greek city-states couldn't cooperate with each other, all they could really do was defend themselves against the Persians. The Persian threat was always there, hanging over them. So when Philip II took the throne, he came up with a plan to finally defeat the Persians once and for all. But to make this plan work, he needed the rest of Greece to join him. Unfortunately, no one was very interested in his idea, so he decided to use force to make it happen. As king, Philip used his authority to mine gold and silver, which he used to fund a massive army and even established the first Macedonian navy. With his strong forces, he marched southward toward mainland Greece. There he faced and defeated both Athens and Thebes in a pivotal clash known as the Battle of Chaeronea. This victory effectively brought most of Greece under his control. At that time, Thebes held the most power among Greek city-states, so defeating Athens was an added triumph. Following his success, Philip went on to create the League of Corinth. This was a federation that included all Greek city-states, although it was far from a democracy. Philip assumed a dominant role as its leader and commander-in-chief. Importantly, joining the League was not a matter of choice. If a city-state tried to leave, Philip would send his army to crush it. The formation of the League of Corinth marked the first instance of unity in ancient Greek history. Philip's ultimate goal was to launch an invasion of Persia, but his ambitions were abruptly halted in 336 BC when he was assassinated by one of his bodyguards during his daughter's wedding. This tragic event not only cast a shadow over what would have been a joyous occasion, but also paved the way for his son Alexander to ascend to the Macedonian throne and reshape the course of history forever. When Philip passed away, his son Alexander stepped into the role of king, despite being just 20 years old. Talk about a quick transition to adulthood. Alexander's first priority was to establish his authority. While Philip's assassination didn't throw the kingdom into chaos, there were rebellions in northern Greece that Alexander had to suppress to solidify his claim to the throne. Next on his list was dealing with the rest of Greece. Many Greeks were never pleased about being under Macedonian rule in the first place, and they saw Philip's death death as an opportunity to break free. However, when Alexander razed Thebes, which was the most influential Greek city-state at the time, to the ground, it pretty much put an end to any hopes of escaping Macedonian control. Once he had secured his rule in Greece, Alexander turned his attention to carrying on his father's mission. The Macedonian kings, both Philip and Alexander, considered Persia their main target. Persia had been a long-standing source of trouble for the Greeks, and it was time for Persia to face the consequences. However, given its immense size and power, there were several other tasks to tackle before taking on Persia. First, in his inaugural year as king, Alexander led his armies into what is now Turkey. There, he aimed to conquer and liberate the Ionian Greeks, even though the notion of true freedom under Macedonian rule might be questioned. Still, it had been centuries since the Ionian Greeks had been ruled by someone who spoke their language, so this change might have been somewhat welcomed. Alexander accomplished all of this in his first year as king, showcasing his great energy and determination. Subsequently, he moved southward, and between 333 and 332 BC, he brought most of the Levant and Syria under his control, securing his authority with the pivotal Battle of Issus. In the same year, 332 BC, he achieved victory at the Battle of Tyre, incorporating Phoenicia into the Macedonian sphere. To top it off, he ventured into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator since the Egyptians were weary of Persian rule. Taking a brief respite at this point, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria, which he designated as the capital of his burgeoning empire. He would go on to establish around 12 different cities named Alexandria, but the one in Egypt would become the most prominent. Additionally, Alexander took measures to gain favor with the locals, notably by declaring himself the son of Zeus Ammon. This was a combined deity comprising the two most important gods in both cultures, and it had a substantial following in Egypt at the time. It was a shrewd move on Alexander's part. In sum, the conquest of this extensive territory positioned Alexander favorably for his impending invasion of Persia. He not only significantly diminished the size of the Persian Empire, but also secured several strategic points from which to launch his campaign, which would commence almost immediately. Following a brief respite, Alexander started the next phase of his extraordinary journey, the conquest of Persia. In 331 BC, the military campaign began in Babylon and Assyria, regions situated in modern-day Iraq, just to the north of the major Persian cities. In an astonishing span of 2 years, Alexander and his forces vanquished the Persian king Darius III and gained entry into Susa and Persepolis, the latter serving as the Persian capital at the time. Recognizing that his rule had come to an end, Darius III attempted to escape, but was eventually captured and met his demise. Alexander ordered his army to plunder the city, and in the process, Persepolis was set ablaze. Whether this was an accident or not, the result remained the same. After nearly 4 centuries of dominance, the Persian Empire lay in ruins. However, this extraordinary success began to inflate Alexander's ego. In keeping with Persian traditions, he declared himself a god king and adopted certain Persian customs, such as requiring people to kiss his hand when they met him. Also, he compelled many of his generals to marry Persian women, hoping to create a new Greco-Persian race loyal solely to him. After conquering Greece, Egypt, Syria, the Levant, Phoenicia, Assyria, Babylon, and Persia in less than 5 years, one might assume Alexander was due for a break. Not so, he thirsted for more conquest. Consequently, after a brief period in Persia, he rallied his army and set out to the east. As he marched, he conquered any territory in his path, eventually encountering the northern Indian kingdoms. There, he emerged victorious in many battles, subjugating realms as distant as Punjab. However, his hold on power in India remained tenuous. The Indian kingdoms he invaded were already formidable. Nevertheless, his success in this region expanded his empire from the Mediterranean to the Himalayas. All of this was accomplished in less than a decade. Alexander's journey westward took him on a fateful path, but he would never reach his homeland. In 323 BC, he fell seriously ill and passed away in Babylon. The exact cause of his death remains a subject of debate. Some suggest he may have been poisoned by one of his generals, a not uncommon occurrence in the volatile politics of Macedonia. Others speculate that he succumbed to a disease like malaria or another illness he contracted during his campaigns in India. To this day, the true reason for his demise remains shrouded in mystery. Nevertheless, regardless of the cause, Alexander's sudden death had profound consequences on the ancient world. The mighty Persian Empire, which had previously dominated, had crumbled, leaving a vast power vacuum in its wake. One of the issues contributing to the ensuing chaos was that Alexander never stayed in one place long enough to establish a stable bureaucracy. Instead, he often appointed his generals to govern in his absence. Consequently, when he died, there were many powerful individuals left in positions of authority, and they didn't always see eye to eye, resulting in intense conflicts and rivalries. But from all this chaos emerged several kingdoms with Greek connections. These places spread Greek culture, language, and knowledge far and wide. This time in history was better known as the Hellenistic era, and it laid the groundwork for the mighty Roman Empire and had a big influence on the modern Western world. After Alexander's passing, Hellenistic kingdoms governed regions across Asia, Africa, and Europe for approximately 2 centuries, strengthening the Hellenization process he started. However, a new global power, Rome, emerged and systematically conquered these kingdoms. Subsequently, the Romans embraced the Hellenistic principles of the conquered regions, disseminating them throughout Western Europe. Even today, this part of the world continues to cherish Hellenistic ideas such as democracy, scientific pursuit, and humanism. While concepts like globalization may appear contemporary, their origins can be traced back to a single individual, Alexander the Great. He connected the world through language, culture, and trade. Consequently, despite his demise more than 2,000 years ago, his legacy lives on. So, even though Alexander of Macedon only lived for 33 years, he conquered a huge amount of land, started important cities, beat the Persians, and completely changed the way the ancient world worked. Maybe he deserves the title The Great after all.